Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Siskanik, and I'm here from the Catholic Homeschool Conference and Catholic Homeschool Community. And welcome. So glad to have you join us. I am so pleased to have today Nancy, and it's Bandzuch. Did I say that right?
Very good.
Yeah, great. Nancy from Catholic Sprouts. And gosh, if any of you have not had a chance to listen to Catholic Sprouts, please do. I know I listen to her playlists as well as just I think I found out about Catholic Sprouts actually through some of the younger moms on being one of those, as I call, seasoned homeschooling moms. And so, in fact, I even got your little Advent program for my grandchildren. So I am really pleased to have you today. Come and talk to us about Advent. And really, we all know this year is going to be vastly different. I know people are gearing up for Thanksgiving right now and thinking about it differently. Okay, on Sunday, the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, we begin a new year. Hooray, Happy New Year. And that's the new liturgical year. And what a great way to really show that sign of hope, the cycle of our life. And I'd love to just unpack with you, Nancy, some of your ideas, some ways I know that you've been thinking about really making this Advent kind of special. But before we dive into that, I would love people to get to know a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about your family and also the inspiration of why you started Catholic Sprouts.
Sure. Well, so I'm Nancy, like you said, and we live outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota with my husband, and we have 5 kids, 3rd grade through 1-year-old. And so I've been doing the Catholic Sprouts podcast, which is a daily podcast for the last 2.5 years. And I started doing that actually because several years ago, my husband found a podcast for our kids to brush their teeth to. It's called Chompers. I don't even know if it's still around. But at the time, my older sisters all had kids before I did. And that gives you like a vantage point to decide how you're going to do everything better. I would watch and be like, well, I'll do this all better. And I always assumed that catechesis would be sort of this natural part of our daily life, especially even with little kids, that it would somehow just sort of organically happen. And then you get into it and it's crazy. And there's always a baby that's screaming. And I lose my temper much faster than I thought I would before I was a mom. And I was really just down on myself that I wasn't doing this. I had thought I would just naturally be catechizing my kids. And what I realized is that it's hard. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to be in the right mood all the time. And so inspired by that toothbrushing podcast, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if they were getting catechized during this little pocket of time that we're always going to make time for, always going to brush our teeth. Of course, there wasn't anything like that. So I started Catholic Sprouts. And I honestly started it. And if you haven't listened to it, it's just 5 days a week, about a 5-minute episode. And we talk about different themes. We're doing Christology this fall, and it's going a little longer. So probably through the spring. And we just try to take, nothing watered down, but try to tell Catholic truths with story and vivid images. So I recorded it for my own kids. And I'm like, we're listening to over breakfast. I don't care if anybody else listens to it, but at least while I'm scooping out oatmeal, even if I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, we're all getting a little bit of catechesis this morning. And and it's really grown. And it's been such a joy to know that I can help other families in the same way that I needed help. And I really love putting it together. So that's really kind of how this whole crazy thing started. Not necessarily with the plan at all, but that's how it happened.
And that's natural. That's just one of the beautiful things about, and I think it's one of the things you talk about in a way too. What I love about your podcast too is this, you always end it with a call to action, a little challenge. So it's this openness to our stage of life and what we're doing. And one of the things, Nancy, that really resonated with me and you is this feeling of how you began Moms Do. We all feel like we're just not doing enough, and we're not doing it the way we really want it to be. So isn't this, great that through technology we can do these things in a way we would have imagined doing that before. So great.
100%. I
Yeah.
know.
So
I feel so grateful that I am a mom now and not a mom when my mom was a mom, that we have the ability to connect and to piggyback off of each other in a way. There's a lot of things that other Catholic moms created for their families that I use here. So, it's just so nice that we can share. So,
yes. Great. Well, speaking of sharing, I'd love to just start unpacking Advent. Let's talk about, you can start wherever you want, whether it's the whole idea of the Advent season, or if you really want to start just talking about the liturgical year.
Sure.
Lead
Sure.
us on that
I
way.
think maybe that will I do a bit better. So Advent. I have been for the last couple of months reflecting on what Advent will look like in our family. And I think all of us are kind of going through a mourning process right now where I think about the Advent season and almost all of my favorite parts of Advent won't be there. Just the huge family gatherings. I come from really big families, and all of those extended family gatherings have been canceled. We were hopeful that we were going to go visit my husband's family in Pennsylvania over Thanksgiving, but with the new restrictions there, and I guess we were just exposed to someone with COVID, it's just like it just feels like you can't count on anything. And I think what we're experiencing is not unique. It's what we're all dealing with right now. And so, anyway, I have just really prayerfully been wondering what will Advent look like in the midst of all of these things. And I think it's really important that we stop and think of Advent differently this year. I have a couple of friends. We were talking about this, and some of them were just saying, like, well, we're just going to do the Jesse tree like we do every year, which is great. I love the Jesse tree. We've done it so many times. And if that's right, then that's great. But I also think if it's going to be different, if we're going to try something different, if we're going to try something slower, this is the year. I don't know if you have come across it, but one of my favorite things, maybe it's been around for a while, but I just discovered, is the Surrender Novena. Yeah, so great. We've been praying it sort of on a cycle with our evening prayer, and I have been adding it also to my morning prayer. Just to me, the idea that even more powerful than any of the prayers that we do, probably the most powerful thing that we can do for ourselves and for our family, this Advent in particular, is to surrender. And, maybe that means this year we're not going to do the super crazy, wonderful Jesse tree that we've done in the past. Maybe it means a much simpler Advent. So at least that's what's been on my heart for my own family, is a simpler Advent, and to surrender to that, because I bet a lot of people in this community for sure can relate to the fact that there can sometimes be a strong conflict between what I really desire for our Catholic life in our home to be, and what my family needs. Like, I want to do all the crafts, I want to do all the things, I want to do the Jesse tree every day when we're supposed to have done it. And I think sometimes more of a slow, maybe just focusing on entering into the darkness, really making the Advent wreath and the candles more of a focal point, singing together. Anyway, I'm personally still sorting out what this means for me, but I just think we need to go into Advent this year with our eyes wide open, ready to surrender some of those desires to do it perfectly, and to allow this to truly be a season of both surrender and waiting and true waiting. I feel like all year we've just been waiting for things to go back, waiting for the restrictions to lift, but we haven't been waiting with, it hasn't been a holy waiting. It's been an anxious, fretful waiting. So that's really my focus. I will fall short, I know, but to just really embrace surrender, prayerful waiting, and simplicity. And I have some ideas to break those down, but those are kind of
Yeah.
the things that are rolling around in my head.
No, I love that. I think that's, again, fresh eyes, right? Being able
Mhm.
to say, even though we love our traditions, and our faith is based on ritual,
Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah.
Let's look at those with fresh eyes. And we may get richer for that, I think, as a way you're saying, slowing down, being
Mhm.
quiet about it. So what are some maybe specific things that maybe some of our families here don't know or would even consider, like doing it a little differently this year? You've got a couple ideas?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when I think about my what's been really meaningful with our family in the past, and the things in Advent are always so simple. And so I know most people are doing this, but just to remember that these aren't like the simple things. These are the most impactful thing probably for your kids. Like number one, make sure you get the wreath out. Make sure you do it right away, and make sure you light those candles as much as you can. If I think back on my own childhood in Advent, it was always like that sensory, the darkness, the candles. I mean, we know how important all of that is just by being Catholic. So embrace that. And I think sometimes we feel like if I'm not doing this super involved Advent study or whatever, it doesn't count. But no, I really do think setting up the wreath, lighting the candles, getting extra candles so you can have them lit often. Maybe this year's the first year you go to real candles, not the little battery powered ones. But just really think like that's not just a background thing, that's an important front thing. The other thing that I am really looking forward to in Advent is singing. We sing more in our family during the Advent season. I know some families are really excellent at singing, even at their meal prayer and stuff. We don't get into that too much. We still have a couple of screaming toddlers and babies around here. But there's something just so richly Advent about sitting in the dark around that wreath with the lit candles and singing. Especially, I mean, I think the only Advent song we actually sing is O Come Emmanuel. Most of our kids only know the first verse, but still, even that, I just think let's just remember that those super basic things are still so beautiful. And even if it's just that, even if you don't have a devotional or you're not doing the O antiphons, which are both awesome, that is still great. So just, especially when life's stressful, when you don't have things going your way during the Advent season, just go back to that. Stay there.
Yeah. I love how
Um,
you explained in your podcast too about, I remember you did one last year. I was listening to your last year's
sure.
Advent. Being intentional even about how
Mhm.
you bring out the candles. So, and really helping the children to understand. So even though you've done it every year, I think you're suggesting perhaps that we kind of be a little more intentional about that
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And
learn about the symbolism.
put him somewhere important even. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's so many great things to think about with the wreath, the shape of the circle, the evergreen boughs. I know there's some families that even make their own wreaths. We don't do that because they die and all the needles fall off. So it's it's more of a mess thing for us. But yeah, just really those things that we kind of push past because we've got to get to this big project, or oh my goodness, we're 2 days behind in the Jesse tree already. Just like let those be what they're supposed to be. Don't let them fall to the back. So the other thing that I think is I always am encouraging families to do this in Advent because it's such a good time is to really invest in a strict routine around your prayer. Even if your prayer is short, and some nights it will get disrupted. But I just think summer's crazy. beginning of school year is crazy. Parents travel, whatever, people, all sorts of crazy things going on. But I just think Advent is such a great time because it's a new year, like you said. You're pulling out the wreath, lighting the candles, doing something very different than what you probably did with your family prayer just before this. Like, for example, our family, we usually do our family prayer kind of in our living room, sitting on the couches. But during Advent, we move over to our dining room table because that's where the wreath is, so that we don't tip that over with the lit candles. So it's just a real feel of different. And I think that's a great time to really invest in that prayer routine. And if the parents in the household haven't sketched out a schedule for the evening, I know many people have done this. I resisted doing this for a long time. And this is, of course, if you do prayer in the evening. If you do it in the morning, that's you could do that as well. But for us, really investing in the fact that like 7:30 to 8 o'clock is when we pray. We can all read the clock now. We sit down, we pray in this way with our things. I think Advent is a really great time to reinvest in that. And at Catholic Sprouts, we've come up with a couple of studies for people to do during that time. Do you want me to share about those?
Yes, definitely. I was just going to ask that question.
Yeah.
What does that look like, that prayer time?
Sure.
And what's it going to look like for your family? Share that with us.
So this is the one that we made this year. I don't know if the light's
Mhm.
working. Yep. So like I said, I was feeling already in the summertime as I was kind of looking to the fall and Advent. I was feeling in our family that we needed something other than the Jesse tree because I love the Jesse tree, but for us, the Jesse tree is it's so woven into the way Advent has always been. It's so woven into Christmas concerts and big family gatherings. I mean, it's been something we've done for 9 years in our family. So I just was mourning knowing that we wouldn't be doing these things. And for some reason, there was just, and my kids felt the same way. There was just a sadness attached to it. And it was almost like if we're going to survive this Advent, we have to do something different. So I wanted it simple. So this is called the Nativity Trail. It's a journey with Mary and Joseph and Jesus, of course, from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And it comes with a map. I can post a picture in here too, so you can kind of mark off the days. But the real intention behind this study is I really wanted to go back to real simplicity. And so I was thinking, especially this started back in Lent. During Holy Week, when you hear Jesus on the cross praying and quoting the Psalms, it was really impactful to me to realize that the Bible in my hand that was holding the book of Psalms was the very same prayer book that he had used, the prayers that he had probably learned to read with and heard St. Joseph recite in the evening. And so that was really impactful to me. And I really started to think about the crazy experience that Mary and Joseph must have had when these angels appeared and turned their lives upside down. And I just thought it must have been that while they were experiencing these things and they didn't know really what to expect, how to articulate their feelings, they must have gone back to the Psalms. Like that must have been, words of comfort, words of anxiety, all that they were feeling came from the Psalms. Just as Jesus voiced his feelings through the Psalms, they must have done the same thing because he learned it from them. So I just really started to think, this window between the Annunciation and the birth of Jesus, all these things that happened, so what we ended up doing is we ended up looking at the Liturgy of the Hours, which of course uses the Psalms, has many Psalms actually attributed to each day during the Advent season. And we picked one of those out. So it's a little bit of Lectio Divina on the Psalms, and it's this really soft introduction to the Liturgy of the Hours for families that you can join into the prayer of the church where, these Psalms are being recited by so many people that have embraced this daily prayer. And then we go into an imaginative prayer. I'm a big fan of imaginative prayer where we, of course, stay utterly true to what is in the scripture, but we sort of imagine or put ourselves there, what do things look like or smell like? What am I attracted to. And even what I feel most powerful to is the reflecting on the little moments around these big moments. Like on that journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem, the nights where Mary was trying to fall asleep out on a rock next to the trail, or just riding a donkey through the little towns in Israel. Just those little moments that we know happened, imagining what they were like and what it was like to truly follow God's will in those little moments. So anyway, so it's a psalm, a reflection, and a prayer, and that's it. And we really work to make it so that a family could use it in 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more, depending on the discussion. Because it's super important to me that we create things that require zero parent prep, because life's busy. So anyway, so that's what my family will be doing this year. I'm really excited about it, just to really enter that journey, because
Yes.
the Jesse tree starts you at the beginning of time and you journey up to Jesus's birth. I felt like starting in Nazareth and going to Bethlehem, that was about the journey that we could do this year.
Yeah, Nancy, that sounds also too, again, very much with that intentional of simplifying, not trying to take a big chunk, really, really trying to pare it down. I know myself, one of the big questions is, everybody's rushing towards Christmas,
Yeah.
and I think this traveling very slowly is something that you're really trying to tap into with the children.
Yeah.
Are there any other, you mentioned a resource you said for the journey. Do you have an example? Yeah.
Oh goodness, it's in my other room. I'd have to go get it. But
That's
yes, it's
right.
a map.
Well, go to your on your website and let
Yes.
people go see that. But isn't it kind of like the kids can actually physically see that they're
Yes.
moving towards something?
Exactly. And you know what? I am going to just, here, I'll
Share
drop a link
ours.
into the
Yeah.
chat so you
Okay,
can see
that
it.
sounds great.
There we go.
Sounds perfect.
So
Thank
anyway,
you.
yeah,
And we'll
it's in
put
this.
it.
We'll
We'll put the links on our
you can print it as a
replay.
big map, or you can print it as a little one.
Nice.
So yeah, just because if there's not something to mark off the days of Christmas, or not of Christmas, when I'm talking about the days of Advent. I mean, that was
Right.
honestly one of my favorites. My mom would always just do the little simple chains for, paper
Yes.
chains. And anyway, I think it's great to really look forward to Christmas, to count down the days. So yeah, I tried it. We always love to do those too. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that question about, anticipation and waiting, and being able to teach children in a tangible way, because as a parent, kids' perspective of time is very
yes,
different than adults.
it is.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it is so hard. One thing you know what? I am so glad to be Catholic. Can I just say that we're like big K-Love listeners in this house. We love K-Love. But I gotta say, what was it? The day after Halloween, and they're all like playing Christmas music already, and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking forward to Jesus's birthday as well, but all in good time. I feel like the church is so wise in that way. So, and there's so many beautiful traditions to keep us on track, right? I'm sure many people do this all the time. Like, we won't be setting our tree. We try to wait till the third Sunday of Advent. We usually fail. I think that's what's really recommended. We usually end up putting it up probably the second Sunday of Advent, but certainly not now. I mean, I feel like this year people are going crazy. Our neighborhood looks like a winter wonderland out there already. It's crazy.
Well, as you said in Minneapolis, you already had your snow, so
Yeah.
it sort of feels that way. But you're right, and I mean, even our world around us is kind of working against that. In our area, people go to tree farms, and unless you tag your tree now,
Yeah,
you're left without a tree. It really is. So
it's
yes,
wild.
it's
wild. Yeah. So hold off on the decorations. I think that does a lot. Sometimes my kids get angry with, not angry, but kind of put out. Everyone else is celebrating Christmas, but not us. Well, That's because it's not Christmas yet. So I think that helps. The other thing that helps for us a lot is to embrace the feast days in December. There's so many great feast days. We cram their shoes with goodies for St. Nicholas Day, St. Nicholas feast day on the 6th. We also, bake bread for St. Lucy, and we usually just make Mexican food for Our Lady Guadalupe, but she's a big patron in our house, Our Lady Guadalupe. So I just think there's other things to celebrate in Advent. And in fact, it feels like Advent's a little bit packed sometimes. So, and so that we do that, but then also, and I know lots of people do this well. The other thing that we try to do is we try to stay in Christmas during Christmas. It is the saddest thing in the world to me when, like on Facebook, people will show a picture of their Christmas tree in the garbage on like the Christmas Day night. Oh, man. Anyway, we really try to stay in it. We try to really take the octave of Christmas and do something special each of those days with our family. My husband usually takes those days off of work. So I think it's very possible, especially to set the expectation in your family, especially like now that we've done that a few years, our kids expect a lot of Christmas when it's actually Christmas. So I think that makes the waiting better. Staying in Advent, making Advent special in its own right, but then really celebrating Christmas. And if you haven't seen it, I have a couple of friends that write for Blessed Is She, and they just came out with a really beautiful, like, Names of Jesus book for the Christmas season called Emmanuel. I'm sure they have it in their shop, but we bought that, and it has a beautiful reflection, even hymns for each of the days of Christmas, all the way up until the presentation. So it's just this beautiful reflection on the names of Jesus to really praise him through the Christmas season. So we're going to plan to do that as well.
Is that the book that's the new one that Kendra Tierney wrote? Or
Nope.
is it a different book?
It's from Blessed Is
Yeah, and again,
She.
if you could be Blessed Is She. Okay. And then we can
Yep.
put that link also in our,
Yeah,
we love recommendations. We love sharing,
Yes.
resources that you find. And yeah, that's lovely because, very often through the rosary and our prayers, we know all the different names of the Blessed Mother, but coming to know Emmanuel, to know Jesus. Absolutely.
Exactly.
That would be
So
wonderful.
It's called Emmanuel. Here we go. I am just going to throw the link in there too. It's really gorgeous. My
Great,
friend, a good
thanks.
friend of mine, Laura Kelly Finucci, wrote it, and she just
Mhm.
has just this way of like penetrating writing. Beautiful. So anyways, so I recommend that. How do you, should I just answer the question that popped up, or should we keep going?
Yes, please do. How do you go ahead?
Okay. How do you keep Christmas through the whole season of Christmas as a family? There's so many resources for Advent, but what do you do to distinguish Christmas with traditions? That is an excellent question. So we take feasting pretty seriously, but we also, my husband's a graduate of Exodus 90, and I'm sure there's people's husbands that have done Exodus 90, which I think was a great refresher for us all of the necessity of self-denial, of fasting. So we plan to throw away all the Halloween candy and get into fasting a little bit better during Advent. And then we feast during Christmas. We have lots of treats. We also plan something fun for each of the 8 days of Christmas. The octave, we plan something fun and now I'm like, well, what do you do this year that everything's closed? I'm like, well, we went to the Science Museum. Well, I can't go there. Anyway, we'll have to get creative, but we try to make it, something that our kids would easily recognize as special during those days. And then the other thing that we do is we sing a lot. Once again, in the Christmas season, we sing a lot of Christmas carols. And we have 2 kids that are amateur piano players that can plunk out those notes on a piano, just the notes. But
well, I do know finding even just Advent music versus Christmas music is a bit of a challenge.
It is.
There are some playlists you can find,
Yes, Matt Maher has an excellent Advent album we listened to like
Yes,
crazy last
and I
year.
think the Daughters of Ephesus, they as well put together an Advent. So yeah, it's worth looking at. They're very haunting, meditative, very often really inspire that waiting, that expectation when you
Hmm.
look for Advent hint, versus the Christmas songs.
Yeah.
I do have to confess that some of my young adults are already trying to infuse Christmas music in the house. So
I know. I know. It was it was my daughter's birthday on Friday. And so we were kind of doing a everything Bernadette wants to do afternoon when when we were celebrating, and she wanted to listen to Panatonic's Christmas album. I'm like, oh, all right, fine.
yes,
Just
yes,
because it's your
yes.
birthday. But they asked to listen to that like in June. So
Yes,
anyway.
exactly. We all love that. And it is true. I think basically what I'm hearing you say too is, it's not about the hard and fast rules about these things. It's really moving with intention and making special what you do
Absolutely.
pick to do. So very, very good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You touched upon some of the feast days, and I was going to ask you about that. Do you have some ideas? Because I mean, you started to talk a little bit about the saint, tell us a few of those. I know St. Nicholas, some of the things you've done perhaps in the past or with your family, which we will be experiencing this year through the Advent season.
Yeah. So, I mean, we only do three. I got to be honest. We're not one of those that I have a younger sister who just does every feast day so well, and I am in awe of her. We do three. We do St. Nicholas, which, of course, all we really do is pretty much the night before, we'll read a story of St. Nicholas. He's in lots of great saint books out there. I'm sure there's lots of them. I know even OSV Kids has a magazine coming out, and they have him featured in there for their December issue. So we'll read a story of St. Nicholas, and then in the morning, there are treats in their shoes. And we don't go crazy, little gold coins. There's a shop called, what are they called? She has a podcast too. Goodness. She has a
Yeah.
little gold coins for St. Nicholas Day. What is that called?
But I know for years our
Yeah.
family business used to do that. It was one of the biggest things. But simply, you can just get the gold coins from the drugstore and
Yeah.
download some pretty holy images, put them
Yeah.
on there, and put them in there.
Yeah.
And then we've also done the thing where you can kind of just make a little bishop's mitre and crozier
Yes.
with a pipe cleaner and
Yes.
pop it on
Yes.
those chocolate Santas and stick them in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of good ideas. Or if you're me and forgot and are just remembering at 9 o'clock at night and running to the gas station, you can just get regular candy. My kids are not
Absolutely.
picky. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Right.
yep.
We do
So,
have another question, Nancy. This one's from
oh yeah.
Amanda, and it does have to talk with Santa. We've always done Santa pretty heavily and are now trying to distance ourselves from that and focus more on Advent. Any suggestions? Our kids believe in Santa. They are 9 to 20 months old. So yeah, let's talk about the Santa thing.
Oh man, I know that's tricky.
hmm
So I grew up believing in Santa. Um, Oh gosh, it's so tricky because it's remarkably Santa is such a personal question, isn't it? I so this is all my thoughts. I think the biggest thing is that I think it depends a lot on the personality of your child, even children within a family. Like our oldest, Gus, is just so black and white, so black and white. And so we my husband and I aren't very good at we aren't very good at the tooth fairy and that kind of stuff. So we weren't going crazy overboard on the Santa thing. But we both grew up with Santa. We kind of felt like it was a thing you did. But then when Gus was just 4 years old on a Sunday, I remember we left mass and he asked me if Santa was real because it was an Advent. And I was like, yeah, sure, he's real. And then without skipping a beat, he asked me, okay, is Jesus real? Like he asked me those questions back to back. And so then I had to be like, okay, wait. Santa is not real. Jesus is real. Like, cause it was very, he's the type of kid where, um, any untruth, it's devastating. It will wipe out all truth you have ever shared with him. So it was very clear to us that he needed the no Santa. He needed to know. We needed to just squash the Santa thing for him. So then our second, Bernadette, I kind of thought like, well, he already found that at 4, she's just a year behind him. So I'm like, well, we're just not doing Santa. So we really didn't do it. But for her, she's such like she just loves like imagination. She loves the mystery of things. And so even though I'm pretty sure I had told her outright, there isn't Santa, she really like, she actually told me, she was a little bit older. She told me, she's like, I know, but I really like believing in him. So she actually like asks permission to continue to believe in him. And I'm like, that's great. Like, we all like watching Star Wars and imagining that world. And if you want to imagine this really jolly man that brings gifts to everyone, like that's fine. So, anyway, I don't have the answer for this. I only have the experience of my children. And I just think it's so important to really be monitoring, because I do have a friend who she's E-free, but she has this whole drama about Santa that like I found out my parents were lying to me about it, and it just almost wrecked my whole relationship with God. And I'm like, well, okay, that's not what your parents were intending, obviously. But yeah, you probably were like my oldest, and you would have benefited from being told that no, Santa's not real.
No,
So
Nancy, that's so, again, very sensitive of you and also astute to kind of understand that really, parenting, and I want to get into this a little bit about what your work with Catholic Sprouts, because I think that's one of the gifts you bring, is this idea that we really need to tailor things to our own children and look at that. Parents tend to play this comparison game. And as Catholics, we want to be good, faithful Catholics. And so, yes, there are those who also go the route that St. Nicholas is distinctly Santa Claus, and he brings the gifts on the 6th. So there's all different permutations of this. But I love how you really recognize that in your child. That's so great. It really makes a lot of sense. So I mentioned something about before we go, or I wanted to give a little bit of time to saying, okay, there's Advent. It's the beginning of the liturgical year. Let's talk a little bit about Catholic Sprouts, how you are teaching parents to become a domestic church in living the liturgical year. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So I'm a slow learner sometimes, I think, but I was doing this podcast for kids for about 2 years. And then I realized after getting hundreds of emails that really have a podcast or a ministry for kids. We had a ministry for parents. And this really like hit home to me after I read Familiaris Consortio by JP2, because he's so clear that, the catechism says parents are the first heralds of the faith. Parents are the primary educators of their children's faith. And just in prayer, I started reflecting on this. Like, I am the primary educator for 5 children, and that feels like enough. Maybe there'll be more along and I'll add them, but I have no right, and I really don't want to be the primary educator of anyone else's children. So we started hearing from parents that would listen to the podcast with their kids, like, I'm learning so much. I feel like I've grown so much. And I realized, like, if we can, because you know how we are, parents will do things for their kids they won't do for themselves. They'll turn on Catholic Sprouts while they're driving somewhere for their kids when they wouldn't turn on a Bishop Barron podcast for themselves. So we just realized we have this unique opportunity to speak to parents and to really both form them, because I think it's no secret that we have, the generation of Catholic parents, myself included, our formation either wasn't very good, or in my case, we didn't receive it very well. I remember sitting in CCD classes and zoning out. And everything I know is something I came to as an adult. The Holy Spirit is very good to us. So anyways, my husband and I just really have taken this on that if the church is going to tell us we are the primary educators of our children's faith, then there needs to be some sort of training for parents. And if, the church is going to say you need to live in a domestic church, I would say most Catholic parents don't know what that means. It means a whole lot more than just streaming mass in your living room. It means a lot more than that. But how do we get there? And if we didn't grow up in a domestic church, then how do we even know where to start? And when a father hasn't been to reconciliation in 20 years, how do you start? So, one thing we've been working on, and praise be to God, we just won a grant through OSV to kind of fund it, to get it started.
Yeah,
it's
we
called
should mention to everybody that they did. I mean, you won this competition for huge grant money to amongst other people, because I think our Sunday Visitor recognized the importance of your work with families. So yeah, tell us what you plan to do as you move forward.
I just think there's finally this realization that there's all these resources for us when we get married, lots. Even if you look on Formed, there's tons of things about marriage and renewing your marriage and all these things. But what is there for Catholic parents? And literally, the future of our church is sitting at our dining, at our tables each night for dinner. So, when half of the millennial generation that grew up Catholic has left the church, it's clear that outsourcing faith formation to parishes, which I'm sure, in this community is not an issue. You guys are leading the way. But just in the larger world where we're outsourcing faith formation, it's not working. It's not working. And so the kind of the God uses all things for good. And I think that is the pandemic. There's more emphasis on the home. And, I think parishes need a lot of help in realizing that whole family faith formation does not mean you just hand people a packet and say, okay, do these crossword puzzles and color this page. It's a lot more than that. And I also think a lot of faith formation in the family misses the first crucial step, which is getting rid of all the garbage and all the wounds. We live lives with so much distraction and clutter. There's no space for prayer in our home. There's no time for prayer in our home. And there's so many wounds between family members that need to be addressed first. So anyway, we worked all summer long. We made a 6-week program for Catholic families, whole families, audio-based. The real thing we're trying to teach parents is how to talk about the faith at home. Because one of the most startling statistics that we found through all of this, OSV is really cool because they say, yeah, ministry's great, but we want to fund things that are going to work, things that there's research that proves that this is actually going to work. It's not going to just be gathering no one showed up to, right? So they said, okay, we like your idea, but prove to us that it works. So we did all this research, and there's a really cool guy out of Notre Dame that's called Christian Smith, the transmission of the faith. And he's done these super long studies, studying the same group of families for years and years. And what he found, and all homeschool families should feel good about this, he found that the number one indicator of whether family or children will stay Catholic is if there are authentic faith conversations in the home. It had nothing to do with socioeconomic class. It had nothing to do with if the parents had great formation or if they were converts or anything like that. The only thing that mattered was if they had regular, authentic conversations about the faith. So that's what we're trying to do, And even if the conversation is wow, I don't know why our church teaches that about contraception. Let's watch a Father Mike Schmidt's video or something, That's still a conversation. And that's still so powerful for keeping kids Catholic, passing on the faith, all of those things. So,
yeah. One of the things, again, I was taking some notes before we talked, and I love this idea that, children, these are the things that you believe in at Catholic Sprouts. It was, you say, we believe that children learn best from their parents, but that children will fall in love with the truth of the Catholic faith, but it's also to model them through an active prayer life, marriage, and a constant quest for holiness. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what are some, tips that you can give us? You have your program, but anything else that you wanted to just share with us in terms of just saying, how do we model that prayer life ourselves? Does it have to be anything elaborate? Do we, because you said you sort of in the beginning talked, you thought just naturally being a parent, you'd do it, but it didn't work. So what are some things we could just on a practical level do?
Yeah. So family prayer is hard,
Yeah.
right? It's crazy. It's crazy. One thing that's been really life-giving for us is we have committed to the simplest, probably version of Lectio Divina each night. We open the gospel for the following day. So we read the daily gospel reading the night before so we can think about it. And my husband had this idea. It was one of those things where I'm like, oh, that's going to be a nightmare. It's not going to work. But he is kind of bullish and optimistic enough to try it anyway. But so what we did is we just read the gospel and then we asked the kids what they heard, and that's it. And what's always amazing is that they're always listening more than you think they are. Even our 6-year-old, he's like a little caveman. I think, his favorite thing to do is dig holes. But anyway, he'll just hear the most sort of simple, beautiful truths. And so, um, yeah, just kind of, I think sometimes I especially can overcomplicate things, and just the real simplicity of reading God's word, trusting it is alive and active still, and asking our children just simply, what did you hear, is super powerful. So
So,
that's been really life giving for us. And it's so refreshing to hear the gospel through the ears of our kids sometimes, because I feel like every time there's a gospel passage, they will hear it better than me because I've heard it so many times that I'll almost be like, heard it, and stop listening. So anyways, that's been really life-giving for us to just open the gospel and just ask them what they heard. So,
yeah.
and and of course with everything with parenting, some nights it's like awesome and some nights it's not.
That's so good. Great. Thank you for putting in that little real spin because there are days, nights where I can remember it's just meltdown and we just go right to bed. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Nothing's going to come out of this, but, and kind of does a disservice to prayer life by yelling at the children.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Yeah.
So, but I
Been
love
there.
how you also said, so I think one of the elements too you maybe brought into this is this idea, how do you and your husband, I've been hearing you say you and your husband, that was another element, about our marriage, how, he was stubborn enough, but you let him do that. Can you share with us some of that little bit of a journey in terms of how you and your husband work together, but what you'd encourage other, husband and wives, because that is another struggle. We don't see things the same way. Yeah.
It is. It is. Oh man, the struggle. I think many women have this desire like, oh, I want him to lead, but I want him to lead exactly like this. I want you to do it, but I want you to do exactly this way. Oh gosh, I have not mastered it. It is a death for me constantly. One thing that I have really learned from my husband is the value of learning with the kids. Um, so his mom actually was a DRE when he was growing up. So of course he went all through formation, but but then he fell away in college and it never really sunk in until, shortly before I met him actually. And so a lot of these things, even like he'll listen to the Catholic Sprouts podcast with our kids over lunch. He's got a corporate job, so he's home. And so they'll all listen to it together. And every day, he's kind of like, wow, I didn't know that about, St. Rose Philippine or Duchesne or whoever. He'll really, so it's what's so captivating to me that he does so successfully is that he's very interested and he's very verbal. So he'll always share that. But just it's so powerful to learn with the kids, because I can kind of have a tendency to be like, you can read, go read that. Or, here's what you're supposed to be doing, go do it. But he's so good about sitting and listening with them or reading it with them. And just like that can really be just so contagious. He's also, I can get really wrapped up in like the way things should be done and the timeline we should be on. And he's much looser with that. So I realize we're much better forming our children as a team than just me. Sometimes he'll get on my nerves a little because we're not on the timeline I'd set. But when I can actually get out of that and realize that what he's doing is so valuable, like I can cram all the things down their throats, but him actually sitting and listening for 10 minutes with them and talking with them it's so much more successful. So I just really feel, and this is just me, but I just feel if I can just get out of my own way sometimes and let him actually lead,
Right.
it works better.
So yeah, and he may lead in a way that you never expected, and
Yeah.
You painted that picture so well for us, Nancy, in the sense of saying that he's learning right alongside of them. That kind of comes right back full circle to where we began this whole conversation of how you put things together. I think you had that intention of just saying when we slow down, fresh eyes. So even in that, we're doing these things learning with them because we're still on that journey. Our formation isn't like done. It's a done deal, right? I mean, I got so much more to learn.
At least mine's not. Yeah. There's
Yes.
so much. That's a beautiful thing about being Catholic, right? There's always a
Yes.
deeper level to get to.
Yes, there is. So I know we're starting to get close to our time together, which has been just like, it went by like in 2 seconds here. But I wanted to give an opportunity for you to kind of let us know about what we can look forward to through Catholic Sprouts, talk about it again, how people can reach you, and just give us all those details. I do promise that we will put those links. You send me, anything you want, Nancy, and I'll put it in our community and pass it on to, especially those that are seeing us in replay here.
Great. So there's one question in the chat about the age that Catholic Sprouts is best for.
Yes.
And so I will admit the music that we have, middle schoolers will roll their eyes. Be warned. I've been told. So I feel the content is still good. I know my husband still listens to it, but who likes to be in middle school? No one likes to be in middle school. But I would say probably best for like an elementary aged kid, or at least a family where there's elementary kids there. I know a lot of family with older kids, even in high school, and they all listen to it together and they all like it. But the high schoolers would never listen to it on their own, which I find it's hard to be that age. So anyway, but
Nancy, do you write all the scripts yourself ahead of time? Oh, they're amazing. It's good. No, because you're a great storyteller, and it is about story, and so so I want people to understand that too. Yeah, maybe the music at the beginning, so maybe mom can kind of cue it past the music.
I know. I'm also thinking maybe we need to upgrade our music. We've had the same for 2 years, and and it's so funny because I'll hear from people that are younger. They're like, "Oh, my kids love the music. They dance every time it comes on," and then I'll hear, like, "Oh, well." The middle schooler rolls their eyes and say, "Oh, the baby music." So anyway, it's not baby music, but I do.
No, it is not. It's very cheerful and danceable.
Music is hard, but anyway, I mean, it's such a joy to put it together. And if you want, we have all sorts of free resources and things over at Catholic Sprouts. And if you're interested at all in our new project, the Domestic Church Project, you can go to domesticchurchproject.com as well. So
with the 6-week program, is that something that people would sign up for as a family? I noticed. Okay. And it's just free resource, or is that something they have to pay for?
So,
Or
well, it's actually going to be in an app. So it's not made yet,
oh,
but it's going to be a
okay.
standalone app. And so, yep. And so it's going to be a subscription. It's just going to be $8 a month. And once you're done with it, you can move on. But we're going to have tons of stuff in there. We're really excited. I'm really excited. We're working on a Saints series in there right now because we were going to write a book, but we decided, well, there's enough saint books. But we're looking at saints based on the emotions that they experienced, because I think emotional education is really important. I mean, in my own children, I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to help them understand what they're feeling. So, so each month there's going to be 7 new saints that celebrate their feast days that month. And so we just got finished recording January. And, again, it's all story based, but when I'm struggling with feelings of abandonment, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is a friend to me because she understands. Or when I'm still struggling with feelings of worthlessness, St. Andre Bessette is a friend to me. So anyway, just really trying to remind ourselves, and myself included, that if we're feeling something, there's a saint that's felt that too.
Yeah.
So
And giving validity to their feelings, and in a
yeah,
way of giving them the tools to be able to cope with it. And our church is so beautiful to do that. That's awesome.
agreed.
That's really great.
Yeah.
I saw all you had these little patches that kids can
Oh,
work through too.
yes.
Yeah, tell us about the patch program.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so
yeah. So
dear.
this is 100% free, 100% free. We love to encourage kids to embrace these Catholic practices that we know are so important. So we offer patches for all sorts of fun Catholic things, like praying the rosary for a month, or if it's part of a rosary if they're younger, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, reading scripture every day for a month. We have one specifically for Lent, one specifically for Advent, for doing the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy, for doing a little saint biography. So we have lots of them, and they're totally free. You just can go and submit your little form when you're done, and we'll send you a patch.
Awesome. That's great. Takes on that 30-day challenge, instead of just losing the pounds, we're
Yeah.
going to get more faith.
Yeah.
I love it,
Well, and I
Nancy.
always feel like when we do something like that, our kids lead the way in motivating us. You put the little countdown tracker on the fridge and they're grabbing their rosary before you even have to ask. So,
Yes. So, and that is again about our faith. It does take time, to be
mhm.
patient with yourself to build a habit, and just so that's a lovely, wonderful thing to do that. I also did notice that you're going to probably work on stuff maybe in Spanish. Is that going to come down the pike
Yes.
too? That's great.
Yes, things are getting a little bit delayed, but our podcast is set to launch in Spanish, Niños Católicos, in soon. Soon. My friend Jose runs a whole bunch of Spanish. He runs a Spanish language podcast network. So it's going to be different content and is only going to be once a week. But there is nothing in Spanish for kids right now, at least audio. So we're going to do that. And we're hopeful to translate the entire domestic church project in the coming year. So
Wonderful.
I don't have the skills to do that. But, when half of the church speaks Spanish, I think it's pretty important. So
It does. And you are so right. We have a very huge Mexican community here in this Pennsylvania, Delaware area. And I know families who minister to them. There is virtually nothing available for them. So thanks. That's going to be
yeah.
something I know that will help the church. Any last remarks you want to kind of leave us with? Something, again, one of those things I want people to realize that Catholic Sprouts, is available on your website. And then to just understand that anything that Nancy does, she does so that it's no prep, mom. It's done for you, and she's going to walk you through that process. So, parting words, Nancy, before we go.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you guys all for investing in your children's formation. It's so important, and we're all part of the same church. So you really forming good Catholics in your home will benefit my own children. So really thank you. Um, I am determined to renew the church through the home. And so whenever I meet Catholic parents, I just want to really remind them that the church with the big C will be renewed by the little churches in our home. So take that very, very, very seriously. What we do is so important. Even if you're too busy to volunteer in your parish right now, even if your parish is closed because of COVID, what you are doing in your home is so important. And it doesn't need to be one particular thing. I just, like you said before, to remind us that God gave us specifically to our families and to our children. You know your children better than the mom on Instagram that you've been following, and really trust that God knew what he was doing. And if you feel in your gut that Advent needs to be a particular way in your family, even if it's totally counter to everything I shared here today, you know better. And so trust that God has a beautiful plan for your family. And I am always so inspired by the words of JP2 from Familiaris Consortio. You know, he really commanded families to be what they are. You know, we are families created to remind God of, or to remind the world of who God is, you know, to be these communities of love. So even during the rough days, even when everyone's screaming, we're still communities of love.
Yes,
so,
we are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You all have my prayers, and it's been such an honor to speak to you guys.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the gift of yourself and the gift of everything that you're doing. We are very blessed by your attendance. I want to remind everybody that this will be recorded. So do invite your friends, family, anybody that you know would benefit from this, which I think is a lot of people. It will be posted in our community. And that community is Catholic Homeschool Community on the Mighty Networks platform. You can go to Mighty Networks, look up Catholic Homeschool, and you will get our community join. It's a free place to join, so please. We also do have a YouTube channel that we'd love you to subscribe to, and you can always reach us at CatholicHomeschoolConference.com. Thank you again, Nancy. God bless everybody. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. Thank you, and have a blessed day.